Yeah, so, this is my review. Let me move the camera back a little bit. So, yeah, this is my review of, season 2 of, Disney Plus adaptation of, Mysterious Benedict Society. So obviously this season is an adaptation of the second book in the Mysterious Benedict Society series, which is, Mysterious Benedict Society and the Perilous Journey. I know my sister and I also did, a vlog on the first season, so I'll just briefly recap. I thought it was fine. By itself, it's a fine series. I don't think it's a good adaptation of the books, or well, the first book at least. It mostly does follow the plot points of the book, but like I said in that review, they did make a lot of changes that I really didn't like. Like, I didn't like that they made Martina a good guy because she was such a good villain in the books. I didn't like that they really didn't seem to understand how the Whisper actually works. That kind of bothered me. I feel like they, overall, like, just like the really big important, a lot of the really big important moments in the book that were really, really strong, they just kind of messed up. Like, they really botched up the, like, the big reveal that Milligan is Kate's father. Like, I didn't like how that was done at all. And just, like, a lot of stuff like that. You might say it's nitpicky, but just as someone who was, like, really, I grew up with these books and was just a really big fan of them, I really do wish that this had been executed better. You know, I mean, I'd been waiting for an adaptation of these books for such a long time, and I really just wish that it had been, more faithful to the books. I mean, I obviously, yes, I do understand that when you're making an adaptation there has to be changes, but I really just didn't get the point of a lot of the changes that they made. And again, it's not a movie, it's a series, so you have more time to go into stuff in the book. You're not constrained by, like, having to keep the movie to, like, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Like, they don't really have that excuse here. So yeah, I mean, like I said, overall, though, I feel like it did kind of follow the major plot points of the book of the kids having to, like, infiltrate this, school, which is really, this institute where, the villain, Dr. Curtin, or Mr. Curtin in the book, as they call him, is really essentially trying to brainwash the entire world. They have to infiltrate this place. It overall does follow the major plot points. This season is completely off the rails from the second book. Like, you wanna know what's similar about this and the book? So, Mr. Benedict and number 2 get kidnapped, and the kids go on a scavenger hunt to Portugal to find them. That's it. Everything else is different. Half the new characters from the book aren't in this. Like, the main, like, the goal of, Mr. Curtin, what he's trying to do is completely different. Like, they don't even, like, have to, like, there's, okay, I guess I can, start off by just, like, going from the beginning. So, it starts off mostly following the book, like I said, so, the kids all reunite after they've been separated for a year, and, there's a bit of, like, tension between Rainy and Sticky, because Sticky hasn't really been writing back, and Rainy feels like Sticky's kind of drifting away. But then of course they go through the whole thing where it turns out, no, actually, like, it's fine, just because, you know, he needs space doesn't mean that, you know, that he doesn't want to be, like, friends with him anymore. That's really kind of the only arc that Rainy or Sticky have in this season. But yeah, so then there's that whole thing, and then of course they find out that, Mr. Benedict and number 2 have been kidnapped, and they were arranging for the kids to go on this, like, scavenger hunt to Europe, and then of course the kids decide to go on the scavenger hunt by themselves anyway without their parents' permission, because they feel like they have to do it to find, number 2 and Mr. Benedict. And then pretty much after that, like, they're just making stuff up, pretty much, like, so one of my favorite, things about this book, I think I actually did like this book a little bit more than the original. This is probably my favorite book out of the series, is that as the books progress and the kids get older, they do kind of, the books start to explore more kind of, like, more adult, more darker themes. Like, one of the big things that Rainey struggles with in the book is that he has a hard time trusting people. We see him kind of growing more paranoid of the people around him, particularly the adults. So like the boat that they go on, there's this guy, Captain Nolan, who runs the ship. And in the book, Rainey kind of goes through this crisis where he doesn't feel like he can trust him. And it kind of creates this barrier between him and the other rest of the group because they don't really... I mean, I guess they do understand why he's feeling this way, but he is kind of keeping more things to himself, and it's kind of like driving a wedge between them. That's a really kind of a major thing that he has to deal with in the books. And basically, as they go through Europe, he kind of just becomes, like, you see him become, like, more paranoid and mistrusting of really, like, all the adults around him. And I really like that they explored it because that's definitely a much heavier and darker thing than, like, anything we saw in the first book. Because, you know, kids are supposed to be able to look up to adults. They're supposed to be able to go to them for help. And, you know, this feeling of, like, realizing that even though, like, just because you're a kid, like, there are still plenty of people out there who are going to try to hurt you and take advantage of you just to get what they want, and that's a really hard thing for a kid to have to come to terms with. So I really like that they kind of explored that. Not in the series at all, not in the show. They just completely got rid of that whole thing. They really, like, Captain Nolan, like, he's completely different in the show. Like, he's just kind of like, just like, some guy who's running the ship. Because in the books, Captain Nolan was an old friend of Mr. Benedict, so that's why he picked that ship for him to go on. It's not just because it was a fast ship, it was because he knew Captain Nolan, so likewise Captain Nolan would know who the kids were. Here, like, there's no connection between him and the kids or Mr. Benedict, so they do this thing where, like, these, like, random people, these, like, I guess these women who are, like, disguising themselves as a water polo team or something, like, they're trying to, like, sabotage them or whatever, and I'll get to that later. But they basically steal their keys so they can't get on the ships, and the kids have to, like, basically stow away. So all of the, you know, the relationship, everything you learn about Captain Nolan is just not there, because there's no connection between him and the kids, so now he's just, like, some random character that's there and then just, like, disappears after a while. Same thing with, there's this character, Cannonball, who's kind of like his right-hand man, and he's this really, like, friendly, really, like, nice guy in the books. You know, he's this very likable character, and in the show, he's this very, like, just uptight, like, everything the ship needs to be running perfectly, and he's, like, basically kind of becomes, like, a semi-villain, because he's basically hunting down the kids as they're stowing away, and I'm like, why would you change that? What are you doing? I don't understand. And again, like, they don't really serve a whole lot of purpose, because after the kids get off the ship, they just disappear, they never come back. And yeah, so basically, so essentially, in the book, what Mr. Curtin was trying to do is essentially, he was looking back to his and Mr. Benedict's, their parents' old research, because I guess they found this plant called duskwort, which they thought might be able to cure their narcolepsy, so that's kind of like his main goal in this, this book, whereas in the show, they do this really weird thing where I guess he, like, develops some form of hypnosis to make everybody happy or something, and he, like, has this little, like, compound where, like, all these people are just really happy, and he's trying to, like, spread it to the world, and then he, like, kidnaps Mr. Benedict in number 2, even though I don't really get why he does that, because, I mean, like, they're not really serving any purpose, like, they're just kind of there at the compound, like, it's not really to, I guess, like, I mean, he does kind of, like, hypnotize his brother, I guess, but I don't get what his goal in this show is really supposed to be, because we see that, like, after the people get hypnotized, they start, some of them start, like, falling into comas. I guess it's kind of like a side effect of whatever, you know, thing he's doing to their brain, and he, like, ends up, like, denying that it has anything to do with his treatment. He's like, no, it's just a coincidence, even though it's clearly not. So it's like, I don't understand what he's trying to do. Like, I guess, like, maybe the idea is that, like, by making everybody in the world happy, they become, like, dependent on him. So it's going back to that theme of control, but, like, after people start falling into comas and he refuses to do anything about it, it's like, okay, what, so you just want the whole world to fall into a coma? Like, what is the goal here? I don't understand. So that I thought was really weird. Yeah, so the whole thing about in the book about like the Dust Court and all the, you know, the things you learn about like their parents and their whole backstory, again, none of that's in the show at all. I said a lot of the characters, like there's one of my favorite characters in the book, is this guy called Mucho Brazos, who was a guy who worked at this, who was a strong man at the circus that Kate used to be a part of. Then he comes to work for her and Milligan at the farm, and he's just really friendly guy who makes like pies and stuff, and he's such a great character. Again, not in the show at all. They just got rid of him completely. Did not like that. Yeah, so like I said, like really like all of the arcs that the characters go through in the book are gone. Like we don't see any of the, you know, internal struggles that Rainey has, or like really any of the characters. Like there's some really dark moments, particularly with Kate and Milligan. Like there's a bit where we think that like Milligan actually dies in the book, and obviously we find out later that he's still alive, but like there is a pretty significant part of the book where you think that they actually did kill him off, and like Kate is like devastated. It's just a really heartbreaking bit, and again, like none of that's in the show at all. Like they really do seem to be trying to avoid any of like the more adult or darker stuff that they get into in the books, and I don't get that, because like that's kind of the whole point, is like the kids grow older, and as the series goes on, that they kind of do face these more like adult themes, and I don't get why they would be afraid of having that in the show. Like, do they think it's gonna make it like less kid friendly? Like it's still obviously a series for kids, even though, you know, these are very, very long books, and you know they do use a lot of kind of more complicated language, but at the end of the day, like it is still for kids. A lot of people I know read them when they were kids. I read these books when like I was in like 4th grade, so like, you know, like that's just very odd, and I don't get why they would do that. Because like there's at least just so many great moments in the book, like, and like I'll just be like doing spoilers pretty much, because like I don't really see the point of like, you know, trying to split this review into like a spoiler and non-spoiler point. But I would absolutely recommend reading the books if you haven't, because they're just much better than this show. I really feel like the show just doesn't do these books justice at all. But anyways, there's this great moment in the book at the very end of the book where Kate essentially, so like the villains of the book are these people called Ten Men, which are these essentially like there's these agents who work for Mr. Curtin, and they're disguised as like everyday businessmen, but they have like, they're called 10 men because they have 10 different ways of hurting you. So they have like all these like really creative like hidden gadgets in the book that are disguised as weapons. Like they have like pencils, which are really darts, and like laser pointers, which are like actually lasers. And they have these like exploding calculators. At the end of the book, we see that one of the 10 men left an exploding calculator where the kids and Milligan and everybody are. So like they're about to blow them up, and Kate grabs it, and she's literally about to like kill these guys with it, and ultimately she decides that she can't do it, so she decides not to kill the 10 men. And like that was a really dark moment, but it was just so good. It was just such a great moment. It was like such a tense moment, and like there's so many good moments in the book that like I wish had been adapted into this show, just because like they're so good, and I'm just so mad that they just went in a completely different direction. They're literally just completely making up the whole plot, essentially. And, like, yeah, again, so, like, the 10 men are not in the show at all, which, again, they were they're great villains in the book. They were really, like, these, like, really, like, condescending, like, guys. Like, you just can't wait to see them get their comeuppance, and here, like, I guess, like, they're the agents that work for Mr. Curtin are called the Greys, and it's really just this, like, one guy that we see, and he's not intimidating at all. Like, that's the thing, like, in the books, like, 10 Men, like they, you know, they had, like, these moments where you would, like, kind of laugh at just how, like, awful and despicable they were, but they were also pretty intimidating as well. Here, like, this, like, the Greys, like, they're honestly kind of pathetic and, like, not memorable at all. So, like, I honestly, like, don't even get why they were in the show to begin with, because they leave, like, so little of an impression. And then, like, on top of that, they add this other character who wasn't in the books, this, like, scientist who, like, worked for Mr. Curtin, and I guess, like, turns out she was actually the one who developed the Whisperer, and then here we find out that she's actually trying to kidnap the kids, particularly Constance, so she can try and, like, rebuild the Whisperer, I guess, and figure out, like, how Constance was able to destroy it, and I guess she's the one who hires these, like, women disguised as water polo players or something to try and, like, go after the kids, and, like, honestly, like, that whole plot point is completely pointless, because, like, Constance and Sticky get kidnapped for a little bit, and then they just get rescued, and then that's it, and nothing really comes of it, so it's like, why did you even put this in the show at all? It was just so bizarre, and, like, everything about I know I've said this probably, like, a billion times by now, but, like, everything about the book is just, there's so much that they cut out, and, like, so much random stuff that they put in, I'm just like, why? I don't understand, what do you guys do? What is the thought process behind this? I don't get it, like, you have, like, perfectly good show that's gift wrapped for you, and instead you're like, actually, no, we're just tossing the trash, we're just gonna do our own thing that is just not even remotely as good. And, another thing with, Constance, like, it really does feel like they don't really understand the character of Constance either, because, so, like, when the beginning, when we see, that Mr. Benedict and, number 2 have been kidnapped, she starts making, like, all these jokes in the show about, like, how, like, he's, like, dead or something, and, like, she's like, we need to respect him in death, and, like, yes, Constance does act very aloof, but that doesn't mean that she, like, doesn't actually care about Mr. Benedict, like, number 2. Like, they're essentially her family, even though, like, you know, she would never, like, be, like, sappy like that. She'd actually, like, say, like, that, like, out loud. Like, she does genuinely care about them, so it's, like, she would not make jokes like that. Like, that would, like, when she finds out that, like, Mr. Benedict and number 2 are gone, like, she's really upset. Like, and, like, she wouldn't, like, there are lines that she wouldn't cross, is what I'm saying, and that is one of them. Like, she wouldn't make jokes about that. Like, she would be absolutely traumatized if she thought that, like, Mr. Benedict had actually died. And here she's just like, yeah, whatever, he's dead. And, like, that's not Constance. Like, she would not do that. Yeah, so that's another thing I really didn't like. And, oh, what else did they change was so stupid? They made it so that, like, number 2, like, that's not a code name, like, that's her actual name. Like, so, like, in the books, you find out in the ending of the 3rd book that her name's actually Pencilla, and it's, like, a joke because, like, she wears a lot of yellow, so, like, there's, like, a joke that all the kids think she looks like a number 2 pencil or whatever, but, like, okay, so while they thought that the name was Pencilla was too cartoony, but her name literally being number 2 wasn't, like, they add this thing where it turns out she actually has, like, family in, like, France or whatever or something, and, like, her mom's like, oh, number, whatever, I'm like, what? That's her name? Like, are you kidding me? And, like, another thing, too, is that, like, she and Rhonda were orphans in the books, so I don't get why they gave her a family. They don't really, they kind of hint that, like, she wasn't happy and she left or something, but it's like, I thought the whole point was that, like, Mr. Benedict was looking for orphans who had no family. Like, I thought that was kind of the whole point. I mean, obviously, like, we do know that some of the kids do have family, but, like, the whole point was that, like, they were all alone, and they all found each other, and they all became, like, essentially each other's family. So, like, it really doesn't serve any purpose for them to give number 2 a family, so that was just really odd. But yeah, so, essentially, like, I'm just gonna talk about the book and the show as just, like, 2 different things, because that's essentially what they are. Like, this season is not the book at all. Like, instead of, like, you know, the whole thing where they're trying to find Duskwort, and then they just go into this thing where, like, Mr. Benedict has to stop his brother from hypnotizing the whole world and making everybody, like, fake happy, even though, like, he gets hypnotized himself or something, and then, like, the kids try to find him, and then, like, I don't even know, like, Mr. Curtin, like, eventually realizes, oh, yeah, I was wrong at the end, then he becomes, like, a good guy, which definitely does not happen in the books. Like, he does eventually get redeemed, but not this early. Like, we still have another whole book to get through, and it seems like now, instead of Mr. Curtin being the villain in the next season, they're gonna have, I guess they have a sister now or something, and now she's gonna be the villain or something. I don't even know. It's just, I just don't get it. And I mean, it does seem like they did hint like they are gonna go into Constance's backstory in the next season, which they do also go into the third book, but they'll probably just like botch that up beyond recognition too. So I don't know. Yeah, like it was just really, it's just so bizarre. And oh yeah, SQ is nowhere in this season. I don't, maybe we see him a little bit in the beginning of this season. I don't remember, but he's like just gone for the rest of the show. I'm like, why? I mean, they already changed him beyond recognition in the first season, so at this point it's like, why even have him in the show? I don't get it. Yeah, so yeah, this is just not a good adaptation of the books. I don't get it. I don't get why they didn't just stick with, the book, maybe just make a couple of changes, but, there are so many good moments in the book, so many, good arcs we see with the characters, and all of that is just completely gone. Oh yeah, they also, were kind of hinting that Milligan and Miss Perimel were gonna be a thing, and when I was a kid reading these books, I was a hardcore Kate and Rainey shipper, so that made me very uncomfortable. Yeah, so I don't know if they're actually gonna go that direction in the next season, but I really hope not, because that's just kind of weird. Yeah, so I would honestly be really curious to hear what Trent Lunsford thinks of this show, because, like, if I were in his shoes, I'd be like, what? This isn't my book? What are you doing? What is this? Yeah, so I don't know. Just very odd. Very odd. Why would they go in this direction? I don't understand. I don't get the thought process behind this. Yeah, so I guess we'll see what they do in the third season, probably even more unrecognizable, because it seems like they're adding another completely pointless villain that's not in the books. So yeah, so guess that's it. I don't know when they're planning on coming out with the next season, maybe next year. But yeah, I guess I'll see you guys then. In the meantime, just read the books, honestly. They're a lot better. Yeah. Bye.